Jonathan, as we pull back now, Harris heading to North Carolina today. Of course, Biden lost that state by just over 1% in 2020. It's a bona fide swing state now, based on at least the latest polling. You can see there how close it is. Harris even ahead in some of the polls by within the margin of error. But at the same time, our reporting shows that the traditional campaign focus on Florida is disappearing. So the electoral map has clearly shifted. Does that favor either campaign? Is one able, in a better way, to adapt to the new paths to 270?
This is the number of pathways for Vice President Harris are multiple compared to what they were when President Biden was at the top of the ticket. When he was at the top of the ticket, there was only one pathway. He needed to win Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. The fact that the vice president is going to North Carolina, that she's spending a lot of time in Georgia, the vice presidential nominee, the second gentleman, the vice presidential nominee's wife, Gwen Walz, they're fanning out across the country because this is going to be a close election and it's going to be decided on the margins, meaning very few people in very few states. And so with the vice president going to North Carolina, there's a sense there that they can win that state back, especially when you have in North Carolina the Republican lieutenant governor, who is now the Republican nominee for governor, who has said racist things, misogynistic things that make him a very a great political foil for the Harris-Walz campaign to campaign against, to help the Democratic nominee for governor, but also to give them a shot, a really good shot at taking back the Tar Heel state.
Elise, according to the New York Times, the Trump campaign's anticipating kind of a tough stretch. And we heard in Vaughn's reporting what sounded like a bit of a picture of a messy sort of campaign happening internally, trying to get Trump to stay on message. His campaign wants him to talk more about the economy. But can they really have that with a candidate who's so focused right now on continuing to defend his debate performance and amplifying conspiracy theories and surrounding himself with the conspiracy theorists?
Well, the problem right now isn't Donald Trump's campaign and their competency. It's Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the one who floated that insane conspiracy theory that was probably his worst moment and completely distracted from everything else that he had to say the other night with Kamala Harris. He really is not a candidate that's misstep. He is not coachable, and he's not going to say he thinks he knows best, and he is going to continue down that path. It is disturbing that someone like Laura Loomer is having that much influence over the nominee of a major political party in America.
I know why Cannibal was in your mind. It's
yes.
Because Donald Trump talks about Hannibal Lecter, right?
Yes,
and all of that
right?
on the campaign. He's the one bringing up cannibals oftentimes. Elise, the Harris campaign scored a really interesting endorsement this morning from a Republican. Former Attorney General Alberto Gonzales from the G.W. Bush administration just wrote this op-ed calling Trump perhaps the most serious threat to the rule of law in a generation. So now you have Dick Cheney, now Gonzales, key Bush-era opponents to Democrats, joining in the same camp with people like Taylor Swift, AOC, Mark Cuban. This is the type of broad coalition I would have to imagine any candidate would dream about going into a general election.
Well, it certainly helps energize Democrats to have these defecting Republicans. I don't know that it makes much of a difference for anyone who's voting for Trump now is still going to vote for Trump, not based on a Republican defecting. However, it raises energy, it shows bipartisan appeal, and it possibly helps those independents in the middle who are debating what they're going to do.
Jonathan, of course, there is the Swift factor, and J.D. Vance, Trump's running mate's downplaying Taylor Swift's endorsement of Vice President Harris. Here's his response to that.
Well, look, we admire Taylor Swift's music, but I don't think most Americans, whether they like her music or fans of hers or not, are going to be influenced by a billionaire celebrity who I think is fundamentally disconnected from the interests and the problems of most Americans.
Billionaire, celebrity, what do you make of his choice of words there?
Well, Anna, I'm confused. Is he talking about Taylor Swift or is he talking about Donald Trump? I mean, this guy keeps making unforced error after unforced error, and also helps the Harris-Walz campaign make the argument for why they should be chosen in terms of competent leadership for the country. You know, and I want to go back to the endorsement of the former Attorney General Alberto Gonzales and his making the argument that, you know, Donald Trump is a singular threat to democracy. A lot has been made about the fact that President Biden put a lot of focus when he was at the top of the ticket on threats to democracy and how that wasn't working, and how with Vice President Harris at the top of the ticket and her change in emphasis on freedom but also on joy has brought a completely different cast to this campaign. What I think is very important about what Attorney General Gonzales, former Vice President Dick Cheney, former Congresswoman Liz Cheney, what they're doing is they are the ones who are making the threats to democracy argument, and they're doing it to fellow Republicans for whom that is a salient issue. And that could be the issue that, while they might not like Vice President Harris or many of her policies, or maybe even all of her policies, but they care about the country. And when you're faced with a threat to democracy and you have those people making this argument, that could give those voters out there the permission to vote for Harris-Walz.